Lovely.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Wanted to take some time today to talk about urban planning and design. And I know when a lot of people hear that, they're immediately, I'm sorry. Also, my name is Osaze Akil Stigler.
I was
Uh,
about to say, we can introduce you too.
yeah, you can go ahead if you want, and I'll hop in after.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Some people um, trickling in. Please use the chat have any questions or concerns, as well as the Q&A button. So as Osaze is giving his presentation, you can put your questions in the Q&A and then we'll answer them at the end. So this is our conservation career series where we're trying to provide opportunities to expand on some different career options for people. So Osaze Akil Stigler, he is an urban planner and designer based in Atlanta, Georgia. He's graduated of the College of Environment and Design at the University of Georgia, currently focused on city planning, economic development, and community sustainability. And today we're going to be talking about urban planning and design. So,
Yes,
take it
thank,
away.
thank you so much. So yeah, like Sharon said, we're talking about urban planning and design today. My name is Osaze, and let's hop into it. So first is a big question that I feel like a lot of people aren't immediately aware of is what is urban planning? I know for me, when I started learning about the field, I had no idea what it was. So urban planning, I'm just going to read this definition and then talk about it a little bit more. But urban planning is also known as town planning, city planning, regional planning, or rural planning. And it's a technical and political process that's focused on the development and design of land uses and the built environment. And it includes environmental factors such as air and water and infrastructure passing in and out of urban areas. When you think about like water infrastructure, like sewer systems and pipes and plumbing, all that plays a part as well. So from rural areas all the way to urban areas, and also factors such as transportation, communication. Communications can be like wayfinding. So when you think about like highway signs or just like any kind of general signage to direct you to where, and wayfinding means signage that teaches you which way to go, basically. And so that also plays a part in my day-to-day is designing those types of signage. So communication, distribution networks, and accessibility. Accessibility is a huge factor as well. So when you think about when you're going into a building, right, you have stairs, but you might also have a ramp. And that's because there are a lot of people who may not be able to physically access stairs or physically access said building using stairs. So you need other means of access points for people with varying abilities. So that is, in general, what urban planning is, and getting into how I got into urban planning and design. So my interest originally, I was always interested in design and I was always interested in architecture. So growing up, I thought, oh, I want to design buildings, right? And that's how I spent my childhood. You know, I would draw buildings. I would just like be really intrigued by that kind of thing. And I still very much so am. So what happened was there aren't as many really strong architecture programs in the state of Georgia. However, the University of Georgia has a really great landscape architecture program. So again, if you think of architecture as like the design of a building, then landscape architecture is the design of everything around it. So that plays a part into, yes, general landscaping, like plants and things like that, but also like what are the access points? How much parking do we need? What are the closest routes from the highway to be able to get to said site? Or do we need to add like another route? You know, do we need to add more roads? What does the road design look like? What does the actual streetscape design look like? And that's more so what landscape architecture focuses on. So that's what I went to school for. So yeah, I was interested in the built environment, wanted to have a focus on architecture, and I wanted the opportunity to be creative and still be in a corporate setting. I love being creative. I love drawing. I love sketching. I love painting. I love doing all those things in my free time as well as at work. So one of my biggest hurdles was, okay, how can I take those same kind of interests and put them in a setting that still allows me to be in a super professional setting? Because I really did want like a corporate experience, right? So that's how my interest kind of led me to architecture at first. And when I got to University of Georgia and saw that they had an excellent landscape architecture programs, how I got into landscape architecture. And from landscape architecture to urban planning, it's just the only difference is urban planning is like a little bit further out in scale. So if you think architecture being building, landscape architecture being what's immediately around the building, urban planning is what's outside of that. So in terms of like the actual city context and the design of the layout of the city and the access of the city and how to get from what points to other points. And also we talked about land uses a little bit, but a land use is essentially what the designated function of an area of land is. So if you go to Walmart, right? Walmart would be sitting on a commercial land use. That's what we describe as like when it's a retail situation. And if you go to like a subdivision where there are houses, that would be a residential land use. And if you go somewhere where there's like a factory, that's an industrial land use. So understanding what uses should go where in context to different sites is a big part of urban planning. And lastly, I has had a passion for design and how I could combine that with impact on community. And you think about when you're designing a city for somebody, that impacts a lot of people. When you're designing new bus routes, right? For example, like MARTA is one of my biggest clients, and we help them. And later on in the presentation, we'll see an example. But right now, we're working on a project called Summerhill BRT, which is basically adding bus rapid transit on various streets through downtown Atlanta. So when we're helping MARTA decide what buses need to go where or what new stations need to go where, it's not just as simple as, oh, okay, we're just putting a new station here. You're thinking about all the people who use said route to get to and from work or home or to school or whatever, right? So you're impacting people's day-to-day lives with the things that you design. And also factoring all the other things in terms of like environmental factors and environmental sustainability and wanting to make sure that we're being environmentally conscious of the things that we're putting into said cities. Those all were really important things to me. And that's how I ultimately ended up getting into urban planning and design. So what I really wanted the bulk of the presentation to be was talking about some project examples. And just on this like cover slide right here, this is another bus rapid transit project, but in Gwinnett County. Can I move my cursor? I can't. So you can see, so you have a main road here, and then you have like these burgundy lanes in the middle, and you can see a bus towards here. But this is what we call a dedicated lane. And that means that the lane is dedicated for buses, right? And this is a station here. So the difference between a bus route and a bus rapid transit route is that there are actual formal stations similar to like what you would consider a train station to be. But instead of a train, you have buses. So when you think about how many people this might be impacting, right? And for this project specifically, we're looking at a site. So where you see all these buildings are right now, there's nothing there. It's just woods right now, just like some open like grass areas. So, but right across is Gwinnett Place Mall. So trying to think about, okay, so how can we activate this space? What are the needs of this area? And what are the biggest things that the community is lacking or like in need of right now? How can we incorporate that? And once they're incorporated from a building perspective and from a development perspective, how do we allow for people to get there? Especially a place like Gwinnett County, where there's a large like immigrant population, a lot of people don't have cars and they are dependent upon public transportation to be able to get to places. We want to make sure that as we're thinking about what buildings we're putting where, we want to make sure that people have a way to be able to access those sites so that they can use them because they're for them. So that is that project. Then one of my favorite projects is the Target Sustainability project. So I'm sure a lot of y'all shop at Target, right? And so I don't know if any of you have ever done the drive up, but for a drive up, you can pull in and then they'll bring you your items basically. So Target during the pandemic took a big initiative to start doing more drive up because they needed to, because a lot of people weren't as comfortable going into the store and shopping. So they expanded their drive up capabilities. And then they wanted to expand it even more to have shelters. When I say shelter, I mean a canopy, like a canopy over the drive up area, just in case it's raining or snowing or just like super hot and you're like sitting there waiting for your items to be brought to you. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to do a larger scale effort to implement these canopies, but also add sustainable elements to them and around them to make it an experience and not just a box to be checked of, oh, we did this thing. But no, how does this enhance the user experience of the people who are coming and giving us money to shop at our business, essentially? So here are a few more photos, and these are renderings. So renderings are basically computer generated images that we create to show what a proposed development would look like. So we use various softwares to be able to do this, including Photoshop, which some of you might have heard of. So Photoshop, and then the 3D modeling softwares are SketchUp and Lumion, largely, that we use. And these are really helpful tools often to be able to get people to visualize what's going to happen to the site, what's going to go where, and how, just to get a real sense of like what it will actually be in reality. So you can see here, this is one of the canopies that we've added. So the front of the store is here, where that Target logo is. And this is one of the canopies that we've converted into a green roof. So this design has shifted a little bit. We ended up doing like more climbing vines, like on the columns rather than the roof. But this is one of the concepts that were bounced around, and how can we, reduce the carbon footprint of the area, add more like pollinator plants and things like that to be environmentally conscious and environmentally supportive. And also it's a cool feature that you don't have at many other or any other shopping experiences that you might frequent. And then you can see we had a trail that goes like in the back of the Target through a series of pollinator gardens. And at the bottom, you can kind of see it. So this is what we call plan view, which is top view. So kind of like bird's eye view, like looking down. And we added a trail alongside a stream. Like this one is shown dry because it would be dry most of the year, but when it rains, it would collect water. And then also that provides a different type of ecological experience and like access to the wildlife that are present there. So yeah, being able to like add in these type of elements somewhere like Target, right, is something that's really cool. And it's something that we're all moving towards as our planet is changing, and we have to be more environmentally conscious to continue to have a planet to live in. We want to, like, we have to live here, right? So we want to make sure that it's healthy and well taken care of. So adding in things like this are super helpful. And another thing that I would say is we added in, so if you can see like under the canopy, there's like this like red pavement. Those are permeable pavers. So when you think of permeability, it basically means that things can go through it. So that's for like water. So when it rains, the water doesn't just sit on top of the pavement, and it doesn't have to go into a pipe necessarily that's going to be sent to a local water source. What it does rather is allows the water to go back into the ground and allows it to be more groundwater, like surcharge, rather. And those are some of the coolest elements for this project, I would say. This was a project that I actually did in school, and I wanted to add this one in to be able to show what kind of projects and things you'll be thinking about if you were to go to school for this. So this was my 4th year like capstone project. So it's like our final project before you graduate, what you present. And it was a site in Busan, South Korea, which is currently an industrial site. So you can kind of see in the periphery, but it's a fairly like dense area. And right now, this entire area was an industrial site. There are still currently a couple industrial buildings, but the task was to reimagine what this space could be like to allow it to be an amenity for the city and an amenity for the community. And it does face waterfront. So this is ocean, right? And trying to understand like, okay, how can we leverage this amenity as a asset in the redesign of this site? And everybody came up with different solutions, but mine was to create a park. And parks have been a significant part of my life and experience. And I feel like cities are made great by their parks. Like even when you think about the city of Atlanta, right? Like how many things we do at like Piedmont Park or Centennial Park or things like that. And Busan doesn't have as many public parks where they can have events or just like community gatherings or concerts and things like that. So being able to add that as an amenity was something that I considered important. So that's something that I leveraged as I planned out the space. So you can see to the north here, these rectangle things, and again, this is looking plan view, so looking like top down, but those rectangle things are little kiosks. If you think about like pop-up shops or vendors can sell different goods, that's what that is. And then right around it, these little circles are tables and chairs. So as people are buying food and buying items, they have somewhere to sit and enjoy the park. And then I created like a series of different spaces and gardens. The little yellow dots everywhere are actually sculptures. So my idea was to kind of create like a sculpture garden in the midst of the park. And if you look here, this is some renderings that I made to show what some of those spaces would end up looking like. So you can kind of see here, back here is like the marketplace area, and then there'll be table and chairs right out front. And then you have this open space that's full with art, right? All these sculptures and things that you can experience while you're enjoying the city. And you are able to have city views. So you're able to have an escape from the city, right? While you're in it, and to be able to incorporate greenery and kind of leave the hustle and bustle and like have a park at that's accessible to you. And these are just a couple more images that kind of show what the spaces look like. And this is a space looking toward the water, obviously, with like a terraced lawn situation. But yeah, so the entire project was a series of thinking about how do we create an experience in the middle of this busy city that allows people to get away and experience nature and experience art in a way that they're not able to when they on their day in the hustle and bustle of the city. So I talked about earlier the Summerhill BRT, which is the Summerhill Bus Rapid Transit Project. So again, this is a series of bus stations and dedicated bus lanes throughout downtown Atlanta. That's actually going to be starting construction this year, I believe. They've already started doing some things. I actually live downtown, and they've started doing like bike lanes and things on Peachtree already that I've helped design, which is cool. But yeah, so this is just a couple renderings of what that is going to look like when it's done, right? Being able to have dedicated bus lanes, a bike lane, enhanced sidewalk and pedestrian access. Those are the type of things that we need to make people's day-to-day lives better when living in the city. You know, like cities are difficult places to live sometimes because there are so many people trying to get from point A to point B and trying to think about, you know, how do we accommodate all of these people, but also make sure they have good lives, and how we're also doing that while also considering the environment and making sure that we're being environmentally sustainable in the process. So these are just a couple renderings of what that looks like. And then this is back to Target. This is just a couple more images of what that canopy structure looks like. And the canopies were designed, so if you can see, they kind of have like slopes, slopes to them. And the canopies were designed to be able to collect water in a certain way for the areas where we couldn't necessarily have green roofs, that they're able to be channeled toward like the landscaped area that could then collect them and allow it to go into the ground. So it's not shown here, but around here would be more landscaped area that the water that's collected from the roof would be able to feed. But what you can see here is the permeable pavers a bit more. So you can see how this pavement under the canopy is different from the road. And again, that is to be able to capture more water as well. Whenever it's running off from the road, that's being able to get captured and then provide more groundwater. And I believe that's the last slide. Yes, so if we have any questions, I think we have maybe a couple things in the chat.
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. I know I have questions.
Yeah, please throw them at me, throw them at me.
Awesome. So for anyone who's joining us, feel free to drop your questions for Osaze in the chat. I can get us started because you mentioned that some of this or some of the things you learned were a part of your capstone project. And I'm just curious as to how do you get from drawing to wanting to become an urban planner? So I guess what inspired you to get into this career field and how difficult was it to get to where you are?
Yeah, so honestly, it was a little bit of trial and error of me just figuring out like, okay, what do I like, right? I said, okay, I know I like designing things. I know I like drawing. It's like, oh, what careers like allow you to draw a lot? And I like went through a lot of things. Like I have a lot of interests. So I thought about, like fashion design and like things like that. And I was like, I really like buildings. Like I've always been fascinated with buildings. Like I've always been the kid who like parents bought them all the Legos and stuff like that. Like I always enjoyed constructing things in that way. So I was like, okay, how can I like turn that into a career? So yeah, I had kind of just told myself like, okay, I think I want to be an architect. And when I got accepted into UGA, like UGA does not have a architecture program, but they do have landscape architecture. So when I saw like how great the landscape architecture program was, I said, okay, what is landscape architecture? Because I had no idea what it was. And that's when I realized like, oh, okay, so like there are people who have to design like sidewalks and roads and things like that because I didn't really have a reason to think about it before. So yeah, so after just like learning more things about what existed, I just said, okay, like let me try that, see if I enjoy it. And then that's what I did. And then so in college, it was not that difficult. It was just me being able to find a program that supported that career endeavor. And then when I interned after my third year, I had an internship at this organization called Park Pride, which is really excellent. They do free design services for lower income communities around the city of Atlanta for their neighborhood parks. And it's really, really excellent. So the design and the construction is usually funded through a series of grants and other funding sources, but the community does not pay for these services to be done. I actually still do some things with them freelance here and there. So if anybody lives in Atlanta, you want to see an example, one of the more recent ones is Maddie Freeland Park and English Avenue, which is like 10 minutes from Georgia Tech's campus. So it's pretty close. It's in the city. And English Avenue is a neighborhood that has experienced a lot of ups and downs in terms of crime and violence and things like that. But they had like a series of like open green spaces that were really abandoned lots that they were able to acquire, the city was able to acquire rather, and over like from a lot of community effort and then garnering support from organizations like Park Pride, they were able to create a city park for their neighborhood. And yeah, so when I did that, that involved a lot of city like zoning meetings and things like that, which have a lot to do with planning more so than landscape architecture. And I was like, oh, okay, so urban planning is probably like what I want to do. Because then at that point, I didn't really know what that was either. And then luckily I had some room in my schedule my senior year. So I ended up taking a couple planning classes. So at UGA, there is not an undergrad planning program, but there is a PhD program. So I was able to take a couple of the PhD courses, which were not easy, considering I was still an undergrad. But it was necessary and I learned so much. And then that set me up to be able to get a job that was kind of a hybrid position between landscape architecture and urban planning when I graduated. And then after like a year in, I realized that I really just wanted to focus more on planning and not so much landscape architecture. And luckily we had the work at the time to support that decision. So I kind of just stopped landscape architecture. Because also landscape architecture has a big emphasis on like plants, right? Like planting design and things like that. Having to get like pre-removal, like permits and things. So it's a lot more like site specific. It's a lot more like smaller scale. And I wanted to like think a little bit broader about the broader context. And everybody's different in terms of like what they want. I don't think it's a better or like worse. I just think like it just depends on your interests. But yeah, so that's how I kind of got into urban planning. And that's like, yeah, how I got here.
Nice.
Awesome.
I was gonna say, so we do have a question in the chat. They were wondering, can you give them some tips on or ideas on how to become a successful architect? They're studying engineering right now, but they are interested in, there is interest in becoming an architect.
Yeah. Do we know if this person is like an undergrad or?
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
Actually, let me just make it possible so everybody can talk. Hold on. One second.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
That way I don't have to. All right, there we go. And there we go. Okay. So all of the attendees should be able to unmute themselves now.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you all?
Doing
Good.
well, doing well.
Yes, that was my question. I graduated this year in May. I'm starting college as an undergrad in engineering, but I really love to become an architect.
Awesome. Well, first off, congratulations on graduating. That's really exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I would say in my experience, there are very few schools that have architecture as an undergrad program. So a lot of
Yes.
architects end up going to get their master's in architecture. I think that a lot of people who know that they want to be architects in undergrad end up doing a form of engineering and design. So whether it's industrial engineering or not industrial, structural engineering, or sometimes civil engineering, you can do as like an undergrad, and you can then just like get your master's. But some people also like have a bachelor's and something unrelated to architecture and then get a master's in architecture. But I think you having a background in engineering is already super helpful because that's going to be super crucial. So I would say to look at like what your school's resources are in terms of, or programming is rather, in terms of like what is the closest program to architecture. And what school do you go to, if you mind me asking?
I am going to Georgia State University.
Okay, awesome. So Georgia State does not have an architecture program.
No, it doesn't.
Right. I'm trying to think, but I know they do have a really great engineering program. So I would probably talk to just a couple professors, honestly. I would probably look at some of your professors and see which one of them like has a architecture background, because you'd be surprised, like maybe a couple of them do, or there's definitely somebody in the department who does. And I would probably ask them, you know, like are there other electives rather that might are there other electives that might be helpful as you're understanding what an architectural career path would look like. But yeah, in general, I think the best way is to probably end up getting a master's degree in architecture and going from there.
Yes, because my planning is transfer after my undergrad to Kennesaw State University, because in Georgia, it's very common that most of school does not require architecture.
Yeah.
So it's very complicated than going forward in a very hard way studying architecture.
Yeah, no, I agree. There aren't too many Georgia schools that have, honestly, even master's architecture programs that I think about it. Because like UGA doesn't even have a master's architecture program. But you know who does? Georgia Tech does.
Yes.
Yeah, Georgia Tech has an architecture program. That's pretty good. So I would just say probably talk to a couple professors because they know better like what program you're in right now and what might be the best trajectory to look to in terms of like grad school opportunities or even like current elective opportunities that can give you a leg up on understanding like what field you want to go into more solidly after.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering my question.
Of course.
I have two more questions for you, Osaze.
Awesome.
So my next question is, throughout your journey of becoming an urban planner, I wanted to ask, what are some of the soft skills and hard skills that you've had to pick up, whether it was learning a certain kind of software or something interpersonal that you've realized that is really helpful to you in your career? What are some of those things that you could share with the group?
Yeah, in terms of the hard skills, there are a lot of technical competencies that you have to garner. Like you said, in terms of software, like, so can y'all hear me?
Yes.
There are a lot of softwares that you have to end up learning. So a lot of the ones that I use on a day-to-day basis are AutoCAD, which is an engineering software. It's more like a drafting software. And then also SketchUp, which is a 3D modeling software. Lumion is also a 3D modeling software. So those types of things, like you just have to learn them. And some of the other things, like the softer skills, like you just learn as you go on. But some of the ones that I think are more important are definitely like just communication and active listening. Is probably one that I would say. Technically I'm a consultant, like I'm in consulting. So I'm client facing all the time. So you have to be receptive to what the client says and what the client thinks, even though oftentimes like the client is not a designer and a client is like, whether it's somebody who works for the city of Atlanta, whether it's somebody who works for MARTA, or whether it's just somebody that owns a lot of property that is trying to develop it, right? These people often don't have the technical expertise, but they still have a lot of big ideas about what they want and what they see, like what they envision for the space to be. So you have to be receptive to that and sensitive to that, and being able to just like understand where people are coming from and try to have like a healthy like middle ground. Because yeah, the client is what drives business, right? The client is who's paying you. So I want to say the client is always right because that's not true. But you do want to always create a product that the client will be happy with. And sometimes that can be difficult when you know something might be better than what the client is suggesting. And you have to find creative ways to communicate that effectively. So yeah, I think just like active listening and just like that's just like relationship building also is a softer skill that I think is super, super important. Also time management is one that I think is super important. A lot of times there are like quick deadlines. It's like things move very fast sometimes with deliverable. So we call it like a project deadline, like a specific task, a deliverable, whether that's like a set of construction drawings or that's whether that's a like a rendering to show what something is going to look like all those types of things are called deliverables. And sometimes they move very quickly, or you may have several that are due like within a tight time span, right? Yeah. So those are, I hope that answers the question. Those are some of the big bucket things that are at the top of my head.
Awesome. Thank you for those. Sheridan may have some more questions, but my last question for you would be if you could give any advice to your younger self about getting to where you are now, or something that looking back, like you wish somebody would have told you, what would you say?
Don't be afraid to try something and not be, don't be afraid that something that you try is going to end up being the ultimate thing. That's what I'll say. You are not one thing. You are multiple things. You exist in multiple ways throughout the course of your life. And I think we do a disservice to young people in particular when we ask them like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because the fact of the matter is you won't just be one thing. And like some people, maybe like from a professional standpoint, but the reality is a lot of people shift careers and a lot of people have interests that change as they experience more life. And that's beautiful. Like that's an excellent thing to do. So don't feel like if you like want to do something right now that you have to like, it has to be the thing that you're going to like die doing, because it may not be. And just give yourself the room to explore as your interests grow. And don't be afraid to pivot if something isn't resonating in a way in which it once did.
Awesome. That's such great advice.
Thank
The
you.
idea that you are always allowed to shift and grow and
Absolutely.
change your mind is an amazing perspective to have. So thank you for that. Sheridan, do you have any additional questions for Osaze?
Yeah, so I'll just do one for the sake of time. But you talked a lot about the marriages between the things that you're passionate about and the things that you're interested in. So you mentioned wanting to work in a corporate setting, which some people do and some people don't, but wanting to work in a corporate setting, but also liking design and art, and then also incorporating like the environment and sustainability. How do you find the balance between those are all technically very different things.
Absolutely.
But I know how they all go together. But how would you describe the balance between all these components?
Yeah, I would say I have the benefit of not just being in a corporate setting, but I'm in a corporate setting with a lot of other creative people. So that's helpful. And I think that like, especially when you graduate school and you're like looking at jobs, like choosing a team or a company to work at, like looking at the team dynamic is like really important. So I think like being able to like work in a setting with other creatives is really awesome. And that I would say that's how the creative aspect and the corporate aspect go together. But also, frankly, sometimes they don't always go together. Like sometimes I'm just like, I really just want to work by myself, right? I would work from home that day. Like today, I knew I like wanted to do this. I had some other things I wanted to do. So I'm work from home because I don't feel like being in the office or like getting ready to like be that front facing today. So sometimes it's really a process of just like making decisions that resonate most when they do.
Yeah.
And that also changes, and that's okay. Because like that corporate desire was something that I had intensely graduating school. And frankly, it's not something I really have anymore. And like if I got a different job or like went into a different career path where that wasn't like a factor, then that would be fine for me. So yeah, things change. I'm 26 now. I've been working in this company for 5 years. So I graduated from J when I was 21. And you know, from 21 to 26, a lot of life changes and you change and you learn so much about yourself. So that's kind of lends itself to my other point too, is like allow things to shift. Because some things that felt like they easily could be married together at one point may not always feel that way. And you need to be able to be honest about yourself as those feelings come up. And yeah, just allow things to work when they do and acknowledge that they're not working when they're not. And that's what I'll say.
Fair. Oh, lovely. Well, thank you so much, Asaz, for speaking with us today. I'll let Kiana outro, but I will say we will put any information that you have about like internships that you did. You mentioned the Park Pride one. Anything that people interested would like to know or need to know, we'll put it in the comments or in the description of the video. Yeah.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for allowing me to do this. It's been great.
I have one more question, please.
Yeah.
Sure.
I want to know that how much mathematics that you use while you're working as an urban architect.
Yeah, nowhere near as many as you would as an actual architect. So I still have to use math sometimes, but I think with architecture specifically, you have to go up to, I don't even know. I don't even want to like butcher it, but you have to take several high level math classes. So I would say because I'm working more large scale, it ends up being more conceptual and not as precise. So I don't need to use as much math as you might imagine, but still like come into play, you know, in terms of like calculating like acreages and okay, like this is how many acres, like how many lots of this specific townhome unit can we fit on this many acres. So I'm still using it, but it's like more simple math. Like it's not anything like crazy. Because if it was, I probably wouldn't be super successful at it because I'm not a math person.
We're
I
not
hope that
using physics and things. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering my question because I really love to become an engineer, but as long as I see on myself that I'm not that much good as in mathematics than art,
Mhm.
that the idea that I have to become an architect, it just make me very stressful that sometimes I'm thinking maybe I'll not become one
Yeah,
because my mathematics is not that much better than everyone else's
Yeah.
trying to become an architect.
I understand that. And I would say to that, you always have opportunity to learn and like be better at things and to like hone your skills. So if you are saying, I really want to be an engineer or I really want to be an architect, then I think that you have all the capabilities to be able to learn the things that you need to learn to be able to get to that point. There are absolutely architects who aren't the best at math, right? And maybe that when they like get into the professional world, that's just not what they pick up the most. Like they pass that to another colleague. They work on some other parts of it, right? So I think that you have the opportunity to kind of decide what you want your career to look like and what you want your tasks to look like. But also if you, as you do more research, if you say, okay, to be an architect, you have to learn X, Y, and Z, and I have absolutely no interest in wanting to know what that is, then maybe it is like a good idea to look at what else is similar in terms of career field wise that you may want to go into that may not be that exact thing. And I think that's okay. And I think you should allow yourself to do that. Allow yourself to not fit into a box, but to rather make a box that you want to be in and that feels comfortable to you. I don't even want to say box because that feels confining, but rather like a sector of life, right? That just feels that you can resonate with most, that is tailored to you. There's every opportunity for you to do that for yourself.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so, so, so much, Osaze, for joining us today. For everyone that has joined us, the recording for today will be available within a week on our YouTube. You can go to YouTube, look up Georgia Audubon, and it'll be there. Additionally, everyone who joined today, as Sheridan said, will be getting the opportunity to learn more about the opportunities and internships and any opportunities that Osaze wants to share with us. We'll make sure that we share them with you. And if you would like, we would love for you to join us next week as Samantha DeJarrett does a presentation about her business, Always Be Burden LLC. So with that said, everyone stay curious, stay well, and have a good week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.